I think we're about ready to get started here. If everybody would take your seats. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I think you'll, we're going to have our next presenter, Principal Security Researcher for our Kaspersky Labs, Kurt Baumgartner. He made sure that I got his title correct. I thought that, but I've heard Kurt on many occasions speak, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy what he has to say. He's a gifted speaker as well as a pretty good principal researcher. I prefer to call him my friend. So if you would, Kurt, go for it.
All right, thank you, Larry. Hi there, welcome. My name is Kurt Baumgartner. I'm Principal Security Researcher with the Global Research and Analysis Team at Kaspersky Lab. Today I'm going to talk Turla. We recently this month exposed some of the infrastructure's interesting and exquisite appropriation of satellite communications for command and control purposes. So I will be talking about that today. So first off, we'll be talking about the Turla APT. Interesting thing about their name, Ultra 3.sys was one of the first drivers that brought this group attention. And when you scramble up Ultra, you come up with Turla. So that's one reason it's called the Turla APT. Other names they fall under is Venomous Bear. There are all sorts of other names that the incident response industry has given this group, but I'm going to stick with the Turla APT. And when I'm talking about APT, I'm talking about a who, not a what. But we'll be talking about their activity, both the components that communicate over these satellite communications and the actual technique of appropriating legitimate satellite communications that they've been using. So again, we released some research we called APT, Command and Control in the Sky. This group is also known for a lot of other activity. Their water holing campaigns, at least one of these campaigns, we called the Epic Turla. And that was very interesting in that it highlighted how selective this group can be when targeting a set of victims. So when they're water holing and spraying a large number of people stopping by a very interesting set of websites, they only deliver the real carbon platform or their real package to a select group of victims. They're also known for the Penguin Turla, or their Linux component. Interesting thing about that component is that it was stolen code from the Phenolit group years ago, and it also communicated over appropriated satellite links. Agent.btz is when they really took the limelight in 2008. It became widely known as a worm that spread across Pentagon networks. But they're also known for Chinch and other follow-up variants and backdoors that are a part of their tool set. They're most well known for their technical capabilities, as demonstrated by their Snake kernel component rootkit. It also has a ton of names. Ouroboros, Snake, but we call it the Carbon Platform, and it truly is a platform. It's robust and modular. And then finally, they're also known for leaving debug strings inadvertently in their code. And the group itself is suspected, or there are artifacts in their code that indicates some of these Vlad, Gilg, and Yurik developers are quite possibly Russian-speaking. So before I talk about the satellite communications themselves, I want to take a look at some of the components of their tool set. And some interesting things come up whenever I'm researching this group. So like I said, in 2008, they made headline news because Agent.btz was a worm that got all over sensitive networks. And as a matter of fact, we found tens of thousands of infections, Agent.btz infections all over the world, including in Russia, for years. So up to 60,000 infections in 2011. And these worms were initially distributed around 2007, 2008. So interesting thing about all of the publications to that point, Threat Experts blog post, which in 2008 was a fantastic write-up, F-Secure's write-up, and the later GData publications, all were missing what the Agent.btz component downloaded from worldnews.ath.cx. And so I started looking through all of the data we have. We know that it's downloaded to $1f.dll, and this is injected into Internet Explorer. And I found the component. So the interesting thing about this component is that it was described as an encrypted blob, but it's simply XORed with 55, hex 55. The ones that I was able to find, and there are only a handful of these files, were simply updates to Agent.btz itself. So in some instances, they include a little more functionality, but for the most part, they're simply updated versions that we have seen elsewhere. The interesting thing about the updated component is that it was communicating with Euronews.ath.cx, and that, of course, was another, at the time, resolving to another IP address that was a satcomm link. Interesting thing, there are two other executables that are identified in the Agent.btz logs, tapi32d.exe and type CLI.exe, and those are also mystery components in the sense that nobody's ever documented what those are. They've always been missing. But we can strongly suspect that they are the Agent.dne components, which also communicate over satellite link, legitimate satellite links at the time, hard-coded addresses, satellite addresses in Germany, Russia, China, and then Togo, a sub-Saharan state in Africa. All right. So like I said, the downloaded component find is very rare. And this demonstrates Turla's high level of sensitivity and selectivity when actually delivering a payload to a target or a victim system. We found tens of thousands of Agent.btz infections in Russia, but the handful of downloads that I was able to identify are really in the Caucasus region, Kazakhstan, and Eastern Russia. Again, this is very interesting stuff because nobody's been able to identify even what was being downloaded. And all of those components downloaded and well, their command and control servers were biznews.ath.cx, this whole list right here, which at the time resolved to IP addresses provisioned by satellite links, or satellite comm owners. So this is my colleague, Stefan Tanas. He's not here today, but he spearheaded the effort in collecting data and identifying this satellite communication appropriation by the group. Thank you, Stefan. So let's talk about the communications themselves, because this is highly unusual that it wasn't noticed until now. But the actual technology for these satellite solutions were used around 20 years ago. And really they're used in areas where there isn't broadband access. So where they don't have network bandwidth, they can use satellite links for download, for data downloads, and then they have this funny way of connecting over a cable or something else, a low bandwidth solution for uploading data. So whether it's a 28.8 baud modem or whatever else, I haven't heard that squelch for a while myself, but the upload link goes through one of these solutions. Interesting thing about that upload link is that it also requires IP forwarding by the ISP. And this is also interesting because the Phenolit toolset from the early 2000s includes a GRE tunneling protocol tool, which is something you would use in order to tunnel this sort of response to a TCP connection over a satellite link. So that's an interesting tool set, the Phenolit tool set, when it comes to researching Turla activity. So what was Turla really doing? Well, they would sniff active IPs. The data comes from satellite communications. Usually they're talking with an unused port on an IP address, or the legitimate user of an IP address may have their system down. The system doesn't send back a reset, so the Turla operator listening, or the C2 that's listening, spoofs that IP address and simply does a response over their own cable, spoofing the legitimate IP address. And magic, you have a hijacked link. And the interesting thing about it is, of course, this is totally delocalized. So your command and control server cannot be seized because, and in a second we'll look at the spread of the satellite communication, but this is thousands of kilometers. Satellites will talk over the continent of Africa. So identifying that command and control server and seizing it would be very difficult. So that's one thing that you completely avoid. You also gain, or the attacker gains, an anonymity because really you're assuming the identity of a legitimate satellite subscriber and providing yourself with another layer to hide behind. Now, there is the issue of returning a communication through an ISP, but again, this is a region-wide or a continent-wide data feed. So it's very difficult to identify and to seize these command and control servers. It's an effective technique for maintaining a long-term infrastructure. So we put together a nice GIF, and unfortunately this is a PDF. I had to go with a PDF. On SecureList, if you visit our website, you can see the full animation. But basically an infected system will talk through or talk out to the internet. It will be directed to an IP that's resolved to a satellite link provider. The satellite will spray the continent with the communication from the infected system, and the legitimate server, if it's up, simply drops the packets. That's what's done on these vulnerable networks. They don't send a reset, so the connection doesn't get killed. That's a part of what's going on here. The Turla C2, in turn, can hear the transmission, and then in turn hijack, identify the TCP, sequence ID, all that, and send out spoofed IP address over its connection and respond to the infected victim system. So again, finding that command and control server and seizing it is next to impossible. It's not going to happen. So this is a very effective technique. Unfortunately, we have seen multiple other groups using it, including Hacking Team. So this is something that unfortunately is going to be with us for a while. There are copycat groups for things Turla do. And unfortunately, this may be another technique that gets spread to other groups. Yeah, so this will probably stymie some investigations into illegitimate traffic going on. So how can you sniff some of the traffic coming across these lines? It's really pretty inexpensive. It's very inexpensive for the Turla APT to carry on these sorts of, to communicate with this sort of infrastructure. So basically you need a satellite dish, you need some adapters, you need a Linux box, and a connection. And really, the bottom line is it's about $1,000 to put together a system like this. In Europe, in the Middle East, it's really pretty easy to find somebody to install the satellite dish for you. So even positioning the satellite dish is something that can be done for you. And again, that can all be done under $1,000. It's not difficult. So I mentioned a little bit that it's completely delocalized. This is one of the very desirable benefits of hijacking these connections. The C2 servers simply are not going to be acquired. It also increases your level of anonymity, although it is not I would not call it perfect, because you do have to communicate on an outbound line to hijack the transmission. But again, the satellite itself will spread its communications sometimes over thousands of kilometers. What we've been seeing most recently from the Turla APT, and what seems to be the majority of their traffic, is global abuse, but mostly in the Middle East and Africa. And that may be because these ISPs are ones that simply have not been upgrading their satellites, and that elsewhere in the world we see upgraded hardware, encrypted links, and other techniques that stymie this hijack technique. Not to say that there aren't vulnerable satellites elsewhere, but this seems to be a favorite of theirs. Another interesting reason may be because simply there aren't a whole lot of researchers in Togo, that I know of at least, that would be interested in sniffing the skies and capturing Turla-related traffic in the first place. Okay, so the components that we've seen over the past almost 10 years now, communicating over these satellite links include Agent.btz. I think with a high level of confidence, we can say Agent.btz was a part of the Turla APT's activity. In the past, that was questionable. There is an XOR key that they have consistently used for almost a decade now in multiple components of their tool set, including Carbon and some other components. And the logging facilities and file names have been pretty consistent for a very long time, which is unusual. So knowing that these guys are appropriating and using this technique for communicating over hijacked satellite links, in all likelihood, it increases the confidence that Agent.btz was directly related to Turla APT activity. Agent.dne, this is a component that really is not publicly documented. We have an MD5 for that downloader in our secure list post if you want to research that yourself. It's a very interesting component, and it appears to be a precursor to the Carbon platform itself. So it maintains an interesting set of dissimilarities with Agent.btz that the Carbon platform does as well, including the lack of an XOR key that's been used across components, the use of logging facilities and file names that showed up in Agent.btz and other components but just do not show up in Agent.dne or the Carbon platform. There are lots of other dissimilarities that indicate DNE is most likely an introduction or a starting project for what was to become the Carbon platform. So these satellite links are all being resolved using either these dynamic domains or, like with Agent.dne, all the IP addresses are hard-coded, which is not frequent for this group, but they do maintain it in a number of their components. So most of the Turla-abused satellites are in Africa, Middle East, and Europe. So if you want to set up your own satellite dishes, that may be a good location. And please, if you do, share PCAPs. That would always be interesting. We know of almost 12 ISPs that have maintained vulnerable satellite technology and have been abused by the Turla APT. The list, at least a good portion of it, is right here. And they have been doing this since at least 2007. In all likelihood, I may not have visibility into previous components. Some of the Minity components date back to 2004. So quite possibly they were doing it earlier than 2007, but that's sort of where the trail ends for now for us, for our research. Okay, so I have some bonus slides that I just kind of stumbled across because, I was looking at some of these IP addresses, this one in particular, this 83.235.19.125, It was being used in July and August of 2010, and at the time, a Greek ISP, who was a satellite operator, owned and provisioned that entire range. And this IP address is one that was used by the updated sort of mystery component that was undocumented as being downloaded by the Agent.btz. So this was definitively a Turla C2 and a hijacked IP address. So what does this Greek IP range have to do with old Cossack movies? And well, as I was stumbling around, I found, if you look in this corner, you'll see Victoria was communicating in 2007 from 83.125. And the Russian here basically shows her talking about, well, the fact that she's 17 and she's just reviewed a movie. So she's very young. She's watching an old Soviet-era Cossack movie. And she's saying, you know, this isn't really what life is. I'm not sure I really think much of this movie. And previously, a year previous to that, Victoria was on another forum. And she was talking about living in Russia and wanting to study in Greece. And this is a very strange coincidence. It's odd that you have Russian students who are moving to Greece, and then a year later, the same IP address is being co-opted for a Turla C2. And I don't totally understand that connection, and this is last-minute research, but quite possibly, if we look through some more old Cossack movie reviews, we'll uncover a little more Turla APT infrastructure. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to close off. I'm going to finish up here, and if you have any questions about Turla, let's go. Yeah.
I've got a mic.
So, question is, if someone will set up this satellite dish and will listen this traffic, can he decrypt it?
Yeah, so the question is, can you decrypt the traffic if you're collecting it? Not all of the Turla components necessarily communicated with encrypted traffic. So the answer is, in some cases, yes. Yeah, other question.
Is there any actual use for these satellite communications, except for, of course, people who are behind those links? So I would guess that simply filtering out every single satellite-based communication from your company network would be a pretty good idea. And I don't think that would throw the baby with the bathwater, so that I don't think that would hamper your typical company operations at all.
So the question is, would filtering these satellite provision IP ranges be an effective way to defend against Turla APT attacks? And, you know, so first, and there are problems with that. So first, if you're a company that you're interested in selling into the Middle East, Africa, or Europe, that would be a real issue. You won't have visitors from these entire ranges. And quite often, well, most often, these are client machines anyways. So I guess outbound connections to those ranges would be something that could be interesting. The other issue is that you're talking about the Turla APT, and if you have an IP range that is being blocked, they will just move on to the next one. So they will find a way to enhance their components to work around your IP filtering. It would be a simple way to start, but I don't think it would be effective against this group in particular.
Another question? Any other questions?
All right.
Well, thank you, Kurt.
All right,
And,
thank you.